Welcome to InDesign 1, Postcard and Calendar. For our first exercise, I really wanted to explore something you were familiar with. I think everyone has had or purchased a calendar or a postcard. And I thought it'd be a great idea to explore travel. As you can see, I picked a whole bunch of postcards that are images of different cities, and then a few calendars, some beautiful photography of national park. For this lesson, you will have to complete one postcard and one calendar by following along with me step by step. Please submit only PDFs and look over the requirements. Make sure you've downloaded the provided images for this project. Also, we will be covering the following tools. Please look over the tools so when I talk about them during the video, you can make note of the importance of them. I also will be introducing 3 new tools: placing, link palette, and tables. Take a minute to look it over and then start the step-by-step portion of this video. Alright, make sure you have images downloaded, you know where they are, and that you're using the ones I've provided. They're all high-res images. So go over to here and open up your InDesign file and create a new one. And here we're going to add the size and dimensions, which we've done in other programs. Let's do the name, which I'm going to abbreviate it to Post and Cal. I'm going to change this to inches. We have the correct size here, which is 7 by 5, and orientation is correct, landscape. We're doing 2 pages, 1 page for the calendar and 1 page for the postcard. And we're not using facing, so if facing pages is selected, please check them off. 2 column. We talked a little bit about margins that edge around the paper. It's going to be 25% in inches around. This is important. If this is selected, it will make everything the same, top, left, right, and bottom. But if it's unselected, you can one longer than the other. For bleeds and slug, make sure that the bleed is 0.25 all the way around, and the slugs are 0, and then the bottom is 1. And hit create. So you should have something like this. If you don't, please pause it, go back and look at the setup. So what we have here is our 2 columns, and then in the center, a column gutter. Edge here is our margin. The margin is a guideline that helps us ensure that we don't put any important information too close to the edge where it will be cut. The red colored line around the page is our bleed. And then the bottom here is a slug. So what a slug is purposely created for production. So production is when I'm about to send this to a printer, and there might be some content that I want to provide for him to see within the file. Please check your pages and make sure that we have 2 pages and not facing. So they need to look like this. If they are facing, then you did not select the correct button and need to go back to document setups and make sure that facing is turned off. We don't want to see this, we want to see that. So this is pages, and we kind of talked about that. We can add pages, we can delete pages. And the other thing I want to talk about is what is master. So the nice thing about master is a page that you can manipulate, and then whatever's on that master, you can have them on every single page you create. So if I wanted a page number, I would set it in the master, and then it would be on every page. We're going to set up our grid, and I can do that under the layout and create guide. Guides are very important when we start designing. So it's going to be 2 and 2. I'm also going to change the gutter to 15 and 15 and then hit OK. And now that I've set that in the master, make sure you're highlighted in the master when you do that. It will affect these pages. Now, if I'm not in the master and I've made one of these pages a non-master page, see how it says non-applied? I'm applying something that has nothing and will not have what we implemented in the master page. But if I take the master page we just laid out, I can put it back on here, and you can see that the guides line up correctly. We want this for the postcard. We don't want this for the calendar. So let's make sure that we apply none for the calendar. Zoom out, which is Command or Control minus. I'm going to use that framing tool, rectangle, and I'm going to make all 4 squares So I know now that in these four corners, I'm going to have an image. But what I don't have is any color around it. So I thought, let's add a color that will bleed to the edge. So once this gets cut, there will be no white because they're going to trim it right to the edge. So I'm going to take my rectangle. I don't need a framing because it's going to say one color. So we're just going to use the rectangle and I'm going to add it. Now I can change the color from here or here or here and here, just like the other software. I am going to flip it because I don't want a stroke, I want a fill. And I want to go into color and I'm going to make a custom color. So I'm going to go into CMYK and I'm going to take the black off and I'm going to change it to a summary 80% yellow. All right, so I've got my fill. The next thing is I can't see frames anymore because my color block on top is blocking it. I need to move it back. Object, arrange, back. Now we can see our squares. We can still see all our dimensions of where we want things. So now we can start putting the images in to our frames. So the next step is we want to go and do File, Place. Make sure you have the selection tool on, and I want to fill by hitting Place. So File, Place. First one, I want to add the second one. You can choose whichever you want. I'm just going to blast through this. Alright, so we're missing some of the image. Anything that's brought into these framing or even the rectangle, even copy boxes, crop it out if it doesn't fit in. So here's actually the full image masked inside of this box. You want to expand out. And if you go to that circle, you can double click on it and you can see it, and then you can just do that Shift Control in. So sure, you can do it manually, but that might take a long time. Here's a quick way of doing it. If you go to Object, you can do Fitting. And we want to always use Fit Content Proportionally. We want to keep the proportions correct. If we don't, you're going to get distortions in the image, which will cause that squish or squashing of the image that I do not like. And then just quickly go through all of them and change them to that. So Object, Fit, and then again, fit content proportionately. Alright, so we're going to add one more decorative element. Let's get that rectangle. And then I'm going to drag it over the margins. I want to line it up on that margin grid. And I'm going to change the line. If you go up here and you have your control on, if you don't have your control on, please make sure you do. You'll miss out this opportunity. And you can choose these really great effects to create some interesting borders. So any of these that you want to choose. I'm going to do the dots. And now I'm going to choose my color. So I can either choose a preset here, decide to do more of a custom color by grabbing the eyedropper and grabbing a color from an actual photo. And then I want to save that color for later. So I'm going to grab it and drop it into my swatches. Also, just think about the size of the stroke you would want. Do you want it really small and subtle, or do you want to go really crazy and big? And the last thing I want to do is add in some bold, interesting type. But before I do that, so that things don't get moved and shift, I'm going to go to my layers and I'm going to lock all of this, and I'm going to call it Art. If you see I double clicked, options came up, and you can look over options that you can have checked or unchecked. I can click again, and I'm going to select that layer, and I'm going to call this text. I want you to select the text. I want you to copy the text that I provided, site page, which is summertime in New Jersey. Use your type tool and drag out a type box and then paste it in. Now, I also gave you 3 options of type. Please follow those instructions. So I'm going to change it to Times New Roman. I'm going to give it a bold style, and I'm going to resize the type. And I'm also going to change, this is the kerning. So look in between the type. And when I change it to optical, you'll see everything kind of changes. That space changes. It becomes more optically correct. And I'm going to drag this out so I can have it all in the same line. And I'm going to kind of have it sit right there in the middle. And I can see that my guide popped in to show me that it is right in the center. And I might want to have it resting on the photo. I might want to try to have it centered in there. You can change the size if you want it smaller or larger, but you have to have the copy in there for me. When I'm kind of noodling things, like do I want just a little nudge, I'll use the arrows to kind of shift and move things up and down. So I like the idea of just leaving it sitting on the edge. And I'm going to go back to that color I pulled with the eyedropper and select it. Let's add 2020 on type on a path. So first thing I want to do is create my curvy path. I'm going to do ellipse, kind of pull it out so it's not so circular. And then I'm going to grab my type tool and I'm going to make sure that it's type on a path tool. And see how that plus goes up? I'm going to select it and then I'm just going to type out 2020. And then I'm going to change it to one of the fonts that I approved you to be using. And there's one right here, Super Clarendon is great. And I'm going to change it to black. I'm going to make sure this is optical. And I'm going to leave the size the way it is. And the only other thing that looks a little weird is one, it needs to be the right color, which I want it to be that blue. So you have to select it and make sure that it is on the T and then hit the color. And last but not least, I want to get rid of that stroke. Make sure you take the stroke off. A lot of people in the past have left strokes on. So none on the stroke. And then you can just move that type so that it kind of relates to the other copy. And then just hit W if you're not on the type tool. And you can kind of see your final product. Just noodle it or do whatever you want to do for just some quick changes. For my final touch, I made 2020 a little bit larger, centered it with the type, and put on a little opacity, which I think gave it an interesting composition. So now save it, and let's take a break. Let's go to our second page. We're going to start creating our calendar. Let's go to Pages, and then let's double click on page 2. If you do that, you'll get the whole page in the window. Control or Command minus. We're going to make some alterations on the page size, so I want some space around it. Select the page tool and change it to 8 by 10 and still in inches. And then we're going to change the orientation. Go to your selection tool and then just make sure that your image is fully seen in the page. So I'm going to do again Command minus or Control minus. Let's go to our workspace and open up our pages. And we're going to create a new master page. And we do that by going to that icon on the very top edge and we hit New Master. And then we can just look it over and hit OK. Next thing we need to do is change that size. You can see that it's still Postcard and we need to make that 8 by 10. Make sure the orientation is correct also. Now we want to link that master page to the page. So we hover over it and drag it. And we're going to get 2 requests, keep current size or use master page size. Because we set it up, let's just use that master page size. For a good start of any projects, we need to make sure we create guide. Go to Layout to create guide. And you want to make sure we think about rows and columns. Columns is easy. We have a calendar, so we need 7 columns for 7 days. But rows, we need odd numbers, and we need to think about the calendar portion and an image portion. So after some thought, I think 7 and 7 will work. Hit OK and select your page, and we're going to move that master sheet to it. Link the new master page. Before you move on, make sure your page is linked correctly with the guides. Now let's grab your rectangle tool. This is the framing tool. And we're going to take the first 3 columns and we're going to create that as an image. Now let's place this image. File, Place. Go to your document. Make sure you know where all your images are. And select an image, whatever image you want. Now you have to be careful about sizing. Remember that this image doesn't come in fit exactly. So you can go to Object Fit proportionally. You might still need to adjust it. So grab your direct selection tool, hover over the image or where that circle is, and use Shift to adjust it into the frame. I hate a distorted image, so go up to your control panel and where I'm hovering is the width percentage of your image, and now it's the height percentage of your image. These need to be equal, so 45 to 45, 100 to 100, so that they're not squished. The next step is talking about tables. Tables is going to help us create our calendar portion with ease. All right, in tables, we have a whole tab of different options, but we're just going to cover the basics of what a table is. So select that Create Table, and we're going to look at this and we're going to think about the body rows. So the body rows is going to be our 4 weeks, and then the columns is going to be our days, Monday through Sunday. And then the header is going to have the header of Monday, Tuesday, our days. All right, we're going to hit OK. We're going to place our table in the 4 rows we have left. So after it's placed, we can adjust how we want all of these rows and columns. By selecting the line, I can shift it up, creating less space or more space. The top row we're going to want smaller. It's our header, and we're going to want to put the days of the week. And below will be the numbers of each day. As you can see, I'm just making final adjustments using the direct tool to move around the table and the art. I've decided to make the image into a full bleed. So again, going back and adjusting the image correctly, making sure that I don't distort the image. All right, let's get started talking over layers. I have art and text, which was the postcard, and Cal art and Cal text, which is the calendar. So set those up and let's get started on the text. Make sure you're on the Cal text layer. And we're going to get the text tool and we're going to pull out our text box. Type out July in all caps, trying to make this really big within this space. Go to the control panel and pick a font. Remember to only choose one of the 3 that I recommended. Super Clarendon. I made sure it's bold and I'm going to adjust the size. I went for the largest possible size. And then for our kerning, I like to always use optical. Remember, it's the spacing in between the letters. To go larger, you have to type out the number you want. So let's do 100. Why we don't see the box anymore is because the letter has gotten too large, the type box. Then we're going to pull out that box so we can see our letter. I wanted to make the type large enough to go all the way across the art. I clicked on W to get back to our guides. Let's look at changing the color for July. We can change it to a yellow, or a white, or a pink, but I think yellow would be good. All right, first thing, we should organize our layers. Let's make sure things that need to be locked are locked, and that Cal Art is unlocked. It's where our table is, where we are going to begin to edit. So make sure you're on the selection tool, double click on the cell that you want to start typing in, which will be that header banner for our days. I wrote Monday, and choose the font, and I'm going to do Times New Roman. Times New Roman is one of the chosen fonts you can use. I'm also going to change the color to the red. I'm going to do a few more style changes after I'm done with the color. So I'm going to select it again and I'm going to change it to italic. I'm going to make it a little bit larger at 14. I'm always going to choose optical and I'm going to center the type. And then I'm going to copy and paste it and change the names to the correct days. In the cells below, I'm going to add the numbers that correlate the day's date. We're going to select the font, Times New Roman. And then we're going to change it to bold, the font size to 24, optical for the spacing in between the letters, and then the color red. Most calendars go up to 30 days, so we'll have to adjust this by inserting a new row. We can do this by going up to Table, Insert, Row. Dialog box will pop up. We'll add one row above. Now you can see that little squares there again, highlighting that we are missing imagery. So we're going to have to open up that box. And now we can see that we have that row just above the numbers. I'm going to want to adjust this so that all of these cells with the calendar dates are equally dispersed from 1 to 30. This might take some time. If you watched this video before, you would have gotten an opportunity to just add that fifth row in the initial setup of the table. Then I just need to do final changes with the number sequence. Here we're seeing our guides, we're on work mode, and we're going to grab some elements from the card. I'm going to unlock the card's text. And I'm going to select by selecting the oval for the 2020 and the text box. I'm holding Shift to select the summertime in Jersey. So I'm going to use these as references, or I might use them directly in the art. I'm going to copy, and I'm going to come back here and I'm going to paste it in. Off to the side in my workspace. Only this is selected right now, and I can move it up into my text. It changes blue. If it didn't, just make sure that you made that correction so both of them do look blue right now. And that's that blue outline that indicates what layer it's on. Now let's lock that postcard because I don't want anything to change on this. And let's get back to our calendar. So what I want to make sure both of these don't have locks, the calendar and the art, so I can manipulate it. I am going to use the 2020 in here. So I'm going to put it up towards the top. You can put it at the bottom, anywhere you'd want. Think about that margin. Remember we talked about margin? We don't want things to get cut off. And I have to make sure I select the type on this oval, which could be tricky. But once you do, this T will come up and I'm going to change it to yellow. All right, so that's fussed enough. And now I'm going to add in my type. But first I want to indicate and put some more emphasis on the days of this family vacation. So I made this postcard to remember this trip that we had, but also I'm going to indicate and give this calendar before we go on the trip so everybody knows when they are going. So again, make sure you have the direct select, you're in calendar art, and you should be able to double click to the point where you can kind of drag over these cells, 1 through 4, and highlight them. If you look up in the control panel, we got some options here that we don't typically have. It's because it has a cell. So I can either fill the outline of all these boxes. I can also fill the line in between the boxes. And I can change the stroke to a different color. So after I do that, I can also fill it in with the yellow. So I got the red as the outlines, and then I've got a yellow fill. And then I'm going to take this information and I'm going to put it on the 4th day, on our 4th of July. Now, if I just copy and paste it, I'm using all the presets that came with it from the postcard. And they're a little bit larger than I want, so the only thing I really want to do is change this to maybe 12, because I want these cells to stay the same as I first set it up. And you could also change the New Jersey Shore to the color that we're using for the calendar. Last and final step is saving. So the first thing is we want to go to File and use Save As. You should select a location where you can find this material later in. So I'm going to put it on my desktop and I'm going to hit Save. I'm going to go and see where it is on my desktop. It's right here. And I want to put these together. I want to be able to make sure that my document is always next to my images. And these are all the images I've been using for this whole project. So I'm going to select them. Mac, you can do a quick step of new folder selection and it'll put all these items in one folder. Now that might happen in PC, otherwise create a folder and then drag and drop them in. Name this folder Indesign Lesson and make sure when you open it, you see the document and the folder for images. Before you submit this lesson and make a PDF, let's check our links. The link panel shows you all the images that are connected to this document. If it's got errors, maybe where the location is, any issues would show up here. If the image is missing, which is the error that we are seeing right now. And it's missing because I moved it from the location that it was familiar with. Remember, this was on the desktop and I moved it into another folder. And this computer needs to know the exact location. Let's relink them. And it's easy. I just hover over it and I can go to that linking and it'll allow me to relink. And I'll go to my images, make sure you know where it is on your desktop, and then I can relink this object. It tells me exactly which one it's looking for on the top here, and then I can open it. And it's saying it indicates that it's found 4 more, and we want to say yes, okay. So not always will it do that for you, but if it does, just hit okay. And so now we have no more errors and all of our images are linked. And here you can also find where the link is in the document. So if there's a point where you're just like, I'm not even sure I'm using this, you can find the location of that image right away by just going to Go Link. So that's where it's located in my document. Because we found errors with the missing files, we will have to save this document again before we create our PDF. In Illustrator and Photoshop, you just use Save As and there would be some information of formatting PDFs. In Design, we don't have that. In Design, you have to go to File, Adobe PDF Presets. Here you can find many options for saving a PDF file. And then you can just go to Smallest File. And then you can hit Save. So you're going to get this exporting PDF window that pops up. And you still have an option here to change or modify how you're going to export this PDF. This gets really custom because depending on how you print and where you're printing, these setups need to change if you need bleeds and crop, which we did talk about it, so why don't we use it? So we're just going to make sure that crop marks are located on our edge to know where it is and that you can see our bleeds. We also created a bleed in document when we first set this up, so please check that and you'll see that our 0.25 is indicated. Go back to General, just make sure everything else is unclicked. You want to make sure we're doing all pages instead of spreads. And then I always like to have View PDF after exporting. It allows you to check it one more time before you send it to me. Now you can export. Now, if everything goes right, we'll get the PDF to open and we'll see that we have created a bleed crop mark for the image. So where these marks are exactly where the image is. So it makes it clear that when you cut this off, you can see you'll not have a white edge because it's bumping up to the other color. And just double check that you have both images. And that's what you would do if you needed to send a file to a printer to be printed. Just remember that this is also due with your exercise this Saturday.